Har, thank you so much for joining us. It's great to have you back on the pod.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. It's great to come on and talk about Canada. Have they been up to anything at all?
A few bits and pieces we've heard. It has been, a very uncontroversial couple of weeks for Canada.
It's gone a bit from "Oh, Canada" to "Oh, Canada."
Oh, God.
Yeah.
Just to give a bit of context first and foremost about what's actually happened with Canada over in Paris. 3 days before Canada's first game against New Zealand, their coaching staff reported a drone flying overhead. 2 of Canada's staff were sent home and head coach Bev Priestman volunteered to step aside for that first game against New Zealand. But since then, things have gotten a lot worse. Priestman was suspended from the tournament and now banned for a year over using drones against multiple opponents and long predating the Paris Games. Canada were also subsequently deducted 6 points in their group. Safe to say, it's been quite a dramatic couple of weeks for Tokyo's gold medalists. So, Har, can you tell us the latest? Because the accusations and whistleblowing hasn't stopped since this kicked off.
Yeah, it seems like every morning you wake up and there's a new statement or there's new news, and it kept coming day after day after day. We saw that Joy Lombardi was arrested. He spent 3 days in prison. And then we saw Bev, Jasmine, and Joy suspended for a year, kicked out. And then the deduction for Canada. It was great seeing them overcome it and get all 3 wins in advance. They were really playing for themselves and looking to advance, which they did. They made the country proud. And you have all that, and still we're still talking about the scandal and the cheating, and that's kind of overridden and taken over the team at the tournament. We should be talking about them, but it's been national news here in Canada. It's been on all the sports shows, so it's not dying down, and it's going to continue because we have to see what the independent investigation that Canada Soccer has undertaken, what's that going to find, what's that going to dig up. And then you also have the previous head coach, John Herdman, who's now coaching with Toronto FC. So he made his curious statement, and now he's not really saying anything. He's letting the investigation roll out. So there's a lot of avenues and a lot of angles and more twists and turns to come. And Andy Spence, is he going to stay on as coach? A lot of questions, not a lot of answers right now.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because, obviously the talk has been about how it's been prevalent. It's not just been the women's side. So, I guess that independent investigation is necessary because you can't really have, the federation, I guess, looking into themselves if it's been prevalent across multiple teams.
Yeah, and what's interesting with that is if the investigation, who are they going to talk to? Who's going to come forward and say, I saw this, or I'm aware of that, or I was asked to do this? Because you don't want to get retribution, you want to be protected, you don't want to have your name in the mud. So I don't know how that's going to work. And then you have NDAs as well. So what kind of investigation is this going to be, and what kind of access are they going to have with individuals that are aware of what took place?
It's tricky, isn't it? It's a bit of a who knew what, when, what role did they play? I guess with Bev, the difficulty is if she did know, but, say she didn't fly the drones herself, it's the knowing and it's being responsible for what's going on in your team, around your team.
I just, seeing those emails, it seems like she was trying to strong arm an individual who was not comfortable with flying a drone or, cheating or trying a nefarious tactic. So that paints Bev in another negative light. And then you have Canada Soccer is the one that turned over the emails. So you have to imagine when the investigation comes out, they're going to have probable cause, or they're going to have the ability to sack her. So I really wonder what her long-term future is in women's football, if she has a football future, and who's going to hire her and what role would that be. So yeah, she comes out probably the worst in all of this, I'd say.
I think that was going to be my next question, kind of where you thought that Bev Priestman was going to go. But I think for me, obviously, there's been quite a few players that have sort of been quite outspoken about the issue. I mean, we saw former Canadian women's national team captain Christine Sinclair sort of issuing a statement straight after saying that, she, in all of her time with the team, had never seen drone footage, had never been exposed to it, wasn't aware of those practices. And obviously other members of the team as well have said, we weren't a part of this at all. I mean, What's the impact been, I suppose, for those players? They've done so well to kind of, forget that and put that to one side on the pitch. But what do you think that the mood's going to be like in camp, knowing that there's a kind of air of suspicion over the squad?
The impact is that suspicion, as you say. Some people say they're cheaters. How could they not know? They must have been aware. And to that, I say, the drone footage, maybe you're seeing the footage, but as a player, you're not asking, hey, where did you get this footage? Did you climb up a tree and shoot a training session? Players aren't doing that. They trust that their coaches are putting them in possible ways to succeed and to advance. So that's not really questioned, but then you still have that possibly happening where they have footage or they're giving information about a corner kick or a free kick or penalties. So that information, where does it come from? Players are just playing. They just go out there and do their best. So I see what, Sinclair, Labbe, and Matheson have all said, but that doesn't really take away suspicion, in my opinion, because you would have to think someone knew or maybe someone heard something. So more is going to come out, and we'll see how this team kind of gels and how they get together at the next window. I believe it's not till the end of October, so we'll see who's on, who leaves, who coaches the team. Can they get someone to come to Canada and play the national team in this country? Who's going to want to come to Canada to play either national team, knowing that might be spied on at your session?
This is the difficulty, though, is that the two things can be true. You cannot have known anything about the drone footage as a player, and I believe the players may not have known about it, but it doesn't mean you didn't benefit from it unknowingly, and that's the difficult thing, and that's why it was such a difficult kind of punishment, and that the team ended up being punished, because ultimately you could have benefited from it. But there's so much footage out there. Do you really need to be spying, and do you not trust your players enough or believe in them enough that you can't get by with legal ways of looking into your opposition?
Yeah, it's ridiculous that you would think that spying and with drone would give you an advantage, because as you mentioned, the footage, seeing all the games, knowing how teams line up and their tendencies, you're not getting a big advantage at all. And if you look at Canada's record against New Zealand, they have one loss all time in 1987. New Zealand, not really a powerhouse in women's football, so going to spy on them, maybe it kind of says that this is a systematic thing that they perhaps do on the regular, and this is just New Zealand because that's who they were playing. The Vancouver coach here in Major League Soccer, he spoke last week about it and said, there's no advantage. Come to our session, you can watch. Ultimately, you have to go out there and play the game. And so I think that's a lot of opinions on what happened. And I think there's no benefit. You're just kind of setting yourself up for getting caught, which they did.
What do you think now, I suppose, when we were just talking then about the kind of air of suspicion and people sort of maybe not looking at Canada and the women's national team in the kind of light that we all saw them before. I mean, what do they kind of do after the games to repair the damage, to kind of get back to Canada being a strong brand in women's football? How do they repair their reputation?
I think the players go on holidays first and get some nice rest and some relaxation. As far as the reputation, it still has to wait until the investigation comes out. I'm wondering if we might see a statement, a unified statement from the Players Association, now that they're not playing games, now that they have some time off, another statement perhaps. So, yeah, the reputation, they just have to go out there and win and play football, which they did in France, and win, which they show that they're capable to do. So I think it's still a great team. It's still a strong, tremendous team. And so hopefully the focus will shift back towards the players and not the scandal.
I want to go back to what you said about Bev Priestman and where she goes from here, because I think we've seen a fair amount of accusations across the women's game over the years, levelled often at male managers, sometimes female managers. You look back to the World Cup, and those managers are still in the game and they still have jobs. Some managers are still coaching while under investigation. So it does make me question, are female managers held to a higher regard? Are we saying that Bev Priestman shouldn't be involved in women's football again because of this? Or do you get where I'm coming from? Like, part of me is wondering, will she be able to come back in, because others seem to get away with an awful lot more?
Yeah, we'll have to see how the investigation plays out, what they find, what role Bev has, what she says, what her legal counsel tells her. She's able to say, she's going to stay in Vancouver, she's going to live in Canada. Her wife Emma is from New Zealand. Bev used to coach in... Yeah,
that was very awkward.
Bev and John used to coach in New Zealand, so it goes way back to New Zealand, always does.
So many layers.
Lots of layers. It's interchangeable there. But Bev, yeah, I think maybe she'll get a second chance, but as far as a national team head coaching job, I think she'll have to work her way back. I hope she does get another opportunity down the line eventually, because I think she's a wonderful coach. Besides the scandal there and the drones, she helped Canada win gold in Tokyo. She's got the tactics. Canada, they hadn't really won a lot other than bronze. And so doing that, beating the U.S. and having that take place, it really put the program in Canada soccer on the map. So hopefully she'll get a job down the line. But right now, tomorrow, today, no chance. So she's going to have to build a lot of bridges.
Yeah. I do think the argument that other teams do it is such a pathetic argument. And, I know there's been talk about, is it really that big a deal? Is a drone flying over really going to get you that much? And for me, it's less about the action and it's more about the fact that you did something illegal that is cheating and you got caught and now you have to face the punishment. So it's less about the what it was. It's more about the fact that you knowingly did it.
Very, very illegal. The fact that it said 3 different times in the handbook and the instructions going to the Olympics, you cannot fly a drone because of the airspace and restrictions. To bring a drone and think, oh yeah, we'll just do it. It shows a lack of regard for your opponents and the tournament. So I have no problem with the 6 points deduction. I think it was fair from the FIFA, and I think Canada did well to overcome it. But yeah, we'll see what happens because it's still pretty much a mess.
Still droning on.
Yeah.
Wow. What a pun. Oh, gosh.
That's the other thing, though, is you can hear drones. They're not like some really secret...
They're not subtle.
thing. You know what I mean? They're not like some super spy software. They're annoying and you can hear them buzzing around and you can see them. So, I don't know. Did they cloak them in New Zealand colours? What did they think was going to happen?
At least put bugs in the bag. I mean, come on. That's surely the way
Someone
forward.
in the bushes with the binoculars. You know what I mean?
It's got old school. So in terms of the kind of timeline, I suppose, for the investigation, when are we expecting that we'll sort of get a bit more clarification about the next steps for Bev Priestman and the rest of the team?
Yeah, I don't know how long the investigation is going to take place. As I mentioned, who's going to speak and who's going to come forward, we'll see. And is the IOC going to do any more investigating? Is FIFA going to look at previous tournaments or previous coaches or games, and how is that going to play out? So a lot more to uncover. I don't know if you guys heard, but there was that job posting earlier this year in January for an analyst, and one of the rules was flying a drone. So you can fly...
Which is fine in training.
Yeah, for your own team.
Yeah.
Welly, well.
More stuff's coming up.
I had not clocked that at all.
But that's normal. You see it happen at trainings where they fly drones over training. It's the quickest way to get a wide amount of footage. It makes total sense.
But in this context, in this what's happened, it doesn't look good.
Must be able to fly drones in other countries and in unusual places that you're not used to doing it.
Yeah, so
amongst strangers.
It's so bad. It's just really bad.
Ola, thank you so much, Har, for joining us and for giving us a bit more of an update about what's been happening in Canada, the scandal, the ins of it, the outs of it, the ongoing mess of it. I really appreciated getting that deep dive. So, thank you so much for joining us. It's such a controversial and newsy time.
Thanks, Har.
Thank you so much for having me on. Great to see you both.
And you.